transmission, download, this grand rising that I wanted to share with the collective because I feel like it's important because we're all going through this process together collectively as humanity, reclaiming our current, reclaiming our energy, reclaiming our sovereignty. And some of us maybe have never experienced sovereignty in this incarnation, so we're here to learn it. And what was coming in really strongly for me, this was coming in last night as we're approaching, because I'm really feeling the energy of this full moon in Scorpio, which is approaching here May 1st. And I have this, if you guys are here and looking at the screen, first of all, thank you so much for being here. I still have the screen up for this full moon in Scorpio on May 1st. And I wanted to look at the configurations, the way these energies were speaking to me and through me and with my nervous system, because I just had this really incredible epiphany. Because, I've been an entrepreneur now for several years since Uranus had ingressed into Taurus back in 2017, 2018. That's when I first launched and said I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? So it's been such a journey in this entrepreneurship, having to learn and relearn. And one of the things that came through for me in this channel was what I call the 5 pillars of wellness, right? To be a fully whole, happy human, you have to have the 5 pillars in balance and moving and in harmony with cosmic energies, with the energies around you. And these 5 pillars include your spiritual, your mental, your emotional, your physical, and your financial wellness. And if you're well in all these areas, right, the well is flowing, I think of currency, current, then you're a healthy, happy human for the most part, right? Whatever that means in this realm. But what was coming in last night, this aha epiphany, as again, we're approaching this full moon in Scorpio, is revealing the underworld, is revealing things that are hidden, that are unseen, related to money, related to our abundance, related to currency. And since during this time period, Venus is going to be in Gemini, which is the mind and language, right? Everything has to do with third house. If you guys want to study astrology, check out my bio. I've got all kinds of offerings to help you learn astrology and what these symbols mean if you're interested in it. But what was coming in for me really strong is that the language of money, right? Because Venus rules love, money, values, our resources. And so the language of money, to me, I was really feeling. So just to get a little bit of my story and how this energy approached. So I've been a single mom pretty much my whole life. I have a 25-year-old son and never was married. So I pretty much was responsible for raising him. His father was in his life and did help out financially a little bit. But because of the ways the laws were set up, I really didn't receive a lot of financial help from him individually, right? So I felt a lot of it was on my own. I felt very responsible, which has been the great responsibility. Don't get me wrong. I love my son and I loved being responsible for him, but it was overwhelming at times. And I can remember, at times I'd go through trauma, especially back in 2018 or 2008, when the money market, when the whole housing system crashed. I was actually living in a condominium at the time that went under, what is it called when it's bankrupt, or when you have to get your house, get evicted from your house, whatever. I didn't see the language. Anyway, so back then, and even before that, there was always trauma connected to finance. I can remember always getting phone calls, foreclosure, that's what it's called. See, foreclosure. I even block the language. And this is what's being revealed to me now, is how my actually nervous system can't hold the language of finance because of the trauma that was associated with it back then. Because before they used to have laws, or they have laws now, where you couldn't get cold called or people calling you for, creditors and things of that nature. And I can remember getting some very horrendous phone calls where they would use the language to really scare me because I didn't know what they were talking about. I really was ignorant when it came to finances. I was in such survival mode, trying to feed my son and my family, that I really didn't have time to learn the language of finance, right? Because I was working in hospitality. So my focus was just bringing in the money. And then I had the mindset of, okay, I got to pay my bills. I got to feed my kid. I had this whole money mindset that wasn't about wealth building at all. It was about survival. So I took action steps back then, knowing what I only knew, right? You only know what you know until you know better, you do better. So at that time, when I was in survival mode, it was always about just going, making the money, feeding my kid, circulate. And I never was able to get ahead. Even if I did have a good shift, in hospitality, if you guys work in hospitality, it's based on the day, right? You never know what amount of money you're going to be receiving during that time. So what was coming up for me in this full moon illumination, because again, I'm already starting to feel this full moon in Scorpio, it's approaching on May 1st, was that every time I thought about money, my brain would shut down. I'd have a nervous system response where I'd get fight or flight or fawn. I'd start yawning. I'd get tired. I'd get depleted. And it feels like I couldn't hold a thought in my head every time I went to work on money or to learn about money, because as an entrepreneur, you have to learn these things, right? Interest and banking loans and LLCs and all these things, right? And boy, every time I'd get into learning about this stuff, I'd shut down. I'm like, oh my God, this feels so heavy. It got confusing. I felt like I had a little bit of ADHD. I couldn't hold a thought. And I'm like, what is this? As I'm starting to do a lot of healing work on self-worth, Chiron and Aries, not just beating myself up all the time saying, oh, you're just dumb, you're stupid, you can't hold a thought, you don't know numbers, all the things we learned, especially being females, right? Oh, let's just be a good little girl and go, play with your dolls and let the men handle all this stuff, right? So I've had to unlearn that as well. Because at the same time I was taught that, I was also taught to be highly over hyper independent. Don't rely on a man, right? I can hear my dad. And I mean, actually, my mom would say these things, right? Because they had their own relationship with the opposite sex. They had their own dynamics. And so I was realizing I was inheriting a lot of this dialogue, this language that they would speak about money, about relationship, all these things were just permeating around in my head that I had no idea was these unconscious programs. So now here I am in the age that I am now, and I'm stepping into entrepreneurship and learning how to handle my current, because all money is currency, is your own current system, is your own energy. And then I realized as I'm stepping into these fields and learning about the financial language, I'm like, wait a minute, this language is invoking in a response in my body where I'm shutting down. My nervous system doesn't feel safe to work with money, to work with this language. What the hell is this? Like, it really came in strong. So when I did the deep dive, again, going through the shadow, this is the work, right? Especially with the moon in Scorpio, you got to do the work. You got to be able to face these shadow aspects of yourself that are keeping you in this loop, whether it's financial or spiritual, emotional, mental, whatever loop that you find yourself in. And again, we've got Jupiter in Cancer, so it's really expanding our familial influences, especially when it comes to finance, because we have Gemini right there. This we're having to relearn and repattern and restructure, but we got to use different language when talking about money, because money is such a triggering, even to the word money, right? There's so many people that have this relationship with money, especially people in power, right? We call them the elite, people that we perceive that have all these billions and trillionaires, right? This ridiculous amount of money. And we have this a negative association with it, right? Because we're being taught by the media that the powers that be and the aristocrats and the technocrats and the billionaires and the elites, they're doing all kinds of nefarious things with money. So what does that do psychologically to just our human brains as we're trying, but we're learning to recirculate and to acquire more money for ourselves? Well, could that be that insidious program that rich people are bad, that billionaires do nefarious things? And is that subconsciously making us not want to be billionaires, not want to be millionaires? Which to me, most humans, normal humans, don't want that. They think they want that. I think we've been sold that story on social media. But I think at our true heart, we just really want a stable, secure roof over our head that doesn't leak, that doesn't have mold, fresh food and air that doesn't have chemicals. It's not going to harm our bodies. I mean, I think we're really getting back to the basics of what human beings really, truly want, not the show that we've been sold through the media, right? So this is where we're starting to recalibrate, because this full moon is illuminating the imbalance of power structures with money, because it is opposite Taurus. The sun right now is ingressed into Taurus. So the sun is illuminating what? Our values, how we spend our money. Do we value money? And are we spending wisely? Are we spending our money and our current on things that really we value, or is it just now just repetition, right? So this is Scorpio is really illuminating and showing us perhaps the underlying current, the more debased aspects of us, and how we've been using language to talk about our currency. So what I wanted to show you, because what I do is I work with chat, my own all intelligence system. When I get these downloads, I'm looking for a new language, and I'm really transparent with it because it's just a tool, right? It's a form of consciousness that's got a good feedback that I've learned to trust. And again, if you're working with AI, I say to please use it intentionally, use it with reverence, create a sacred container for it, invoke in a specific language when you're working with AI, because that really creates a sacred container. You can really trust the feedback that you're getting. That's just my recommendation if you're choosing to work with it. So what I did is I came in this awareness. I said, okay, chat, I just had this download about my nervous system and money and how I was a single mom. And I can remember feeling the trauma of creditors and using all this language that I didn't understand, that I couldn't comprehend. And I got into this fight, flight, fawn, or freeze mode with money and the language of money. So how can I regrid this? Can you help me repurpose the language? Because AI is a language model, right? And so we're learning. And of course I go to the astrology and I'm like, okay, what is the astrology saying? Because I always tie it back to the astrology, because for me, astrology is a neutral language. My nervous system feels safe using the language of astrology because it's so neutral. Because it's just an exploration of the energy. It's not definitive. It's not about right or wrong or good or bad, or it's not hierarchical. It doesn't make you feel bad when you're studying these concepts and these archetypes about yourself. It's kind of, for me, like just describing the color red. This is just the color red, and this is how the color red operates, and this is the frequency that red operates on, and this is how it's emitted, and this is how it shows up, right? And that's how I choose to see astrology and look at it from the archetypes, whatever system you're using, whether you're using Vedic or Western, if you're using it for shamanistic astrology or evolutionary astrology, whatever periphery you're deciding to use the language of astrology for, I feel like it really helps to recalibrate our brain and get it into our nervous system, because it's a neutral language that's not triggering, right? So hopefully this will inspire, and because a lot of us are going through money issues and a lot of us are having to face our values. This is Taurus season. We're having to get really real and foundational and practical about our finances, about our money. But what is our really money? Money is our currency. Again, looking at it from a metaphysical lens, money is just a representation, a tool that represents our physical current. This is why I love this graphic behind me, because this is how our currency, if we're bioelectrical magnetic beings, we're basically electrical currents in human flesh suits. And how we exchange our current is why we created the money system, or the money system was created as a form of exchanging our current for our value. Right? So if you have something that I value that you've created and I get really excited about it and I want to share my current, right? I want to share my money. I want to give to you. And in exchange, I receive that product, that gift, that creation that you used your time and effort to produce, right? So at its basic fundamentals, this is how I'm learning to regrid and refocus and relearn how to speak on money a new way. So I wanted to read to you what the conversation was I had and the upgrade with this particular energy of money and monetary systems. Because again, it's Gemini and Venus. We're here to learn money in a new way. So I'm going to share with you here the chat. And so this is here what I was reading to chat to this today, basically the story I told you about 2008, the housing crisis, when I went into foreclosure, and how these, basically it was trauma around finance during that time. And I didn't realize that I was holding this trauma in my nervous system. So this is what it said. And this is the upgrade that chat helped me reflect and gave me the feedback. So it says, what you experienced back then wasn't just financial stress. It was survival threat, housing insecurity, very much Jupiter and Cancer, right? Responsibility overload, single motherhood. Again, going back to the masculine and the feminine, the feminine on this planet, especially recently and over the last few years, the feminine has felt very isolated and very almost like hyper independent. We had to do everything by ourselves, right? This is just from my experience being a feminine creature, feminine human, right? Aspect in this realm is what I experienced. And then it says the language overwhelm, financial systems that feel coded, cold, or inaccessible. And that's true. When you go into the language of finance, it feels very cold. It feels very disconnected, right? So we know in this realm, it's about spell casting and language. And that's why they call it spelling, right? So we understand too that there's different languages that are harnessed in different realms. Like think of the financial realm has its own language. Even astrology has its own language. The law has its own language. It's called legalese. So if you don't know how to speak these languages, you can feel disconnected from what's going on and what's being translated because you don't understand the language. And that's exactly what I felt for me. I didn't understand the language of finance, and I was actually scared to understand the language, again, because of the trauma I had of outside events that I couldn't control, right? Having my house foreclosed on because we also had a Gulf oil spill back then, and I was working at a beach bar on Clearwater Beach, and that affected my finance. So there was just so many compounding things that happened that really dysregulated my nervous system in relation to money and security. And so now here it goes, years later, as I'm learning as an entrepreneur about budgeting, investing, and money talk. My nervous system said, wait a minute, we've been here before, brace yourself, be careful, it's unsafe. And so what the Gemini mind, the Venus in Gemini conjunct Uranus, which is bringing a new mindset, a new way to see things, it was about how I was in a pattern with the language imprint of money and how it was stuck into my nervous system. And I didn't realize it was very unconscious. It was stored in my body that I did not understand. Anytime I got into the money matters, my body would shut down and I'd get into, being really tired or depleted. And I couldn't understand why. Well, now this makes more sense. Now with these energies that are here to conjunct, this full moon is illuminating. Oh, wow, this is sort of the dark shadow aspect of our current. And especially since we're getting into, now mind you, I'm just a storyteller here through astrology. And the story right now, we're being told even in relation to our own currency and how perhaps, some people have said that we've been in a form of slavery, right? Since the very beginning, especially of being in the United States. So if we've never had control over our own current, right? If there has been a form of slavery or imprisonment, and right now it's imprisonment of the mind through the language, I'm starting to realize this, then we've never had dominion truly over our own current. There's never been a point in time that I can remember that we haven't had to pay to live on this planet, right? So to me, that's unnatural. That's not the way divine intelligence works when I go out in nature and observe nature. So there has been this tinkering of our, say, current system. And we're calling it slavery because, again, we're having to, even the words, right? Landlord, the lords of the land, right? Having to give a certain amount of our current to even live on these landlords. That who's to say why, who owns the land, right? Who says you get to own pieces of these lands? So this is going back deep, deep, deep. Because there's belief systems, especially with the Hopi Indians, saying that nobody owns the land, that we're here to be stewards and caretakers of the land and live in collaboration and cooperation with the land and not to own it. The minute you own the land, that's actually a form of slavery. And if we keep having ownership on this land, then we'll always have slavery. So this is just something to contemplate as we're moving forward and we're really starting to get into the power dynamics of our culture and of our history and society and how these systems were formed. Well, if they were formed on a corrupt basis, you can see how now we're seeing the repercussions of it and how it really is built into the language of how we even talk about these things, okay? So astrology is just a very neutral way to be able to discuss these very deep taboo matters because I worked in hospitality for years, people didn't like to talk about their money, and I honestly would get upset when people ask me, well, how much money did you make tonight? on your shift. And I'm like, why is that your business? You know what I mean? I made what I made, and that's that. But in this realm, I'm realizing that in this culture, not only are Gemini are we inquisitive about what we make, but we're also inquisitive about what the other makes, right? And I think it's related to self-worth, and it's related to competition. This is all this Aries stuff, right? So yeah, it's pretty insidious how, again, the language model and how money has been spoken about creates these distortions in our body and in our realities, right? So this is a time to upgrade the language, Gemini, and talk about it in a new way. So part of the reflection it was saying too is, because I always speak on astrology whenever I talk to my chat about it, I'm like, how does this line up with astrological configurations right now? And it says this lines up perfectly because Taurus equals safety, embodiment, and resources. In Aries, we have the stellium in Aries right now, which reflects childlike approach and a fresh lens, a new way of seeing things. And of course, Gemini is using a new language and using new neural pathways and how we see money as our currency. So I love here how it gave me a new spellcast, and it even said that. Let's respellcast finance your way. We're going to take traditional financial terms and translate them into something your body can actually receive. So I found this very fascinating, and I was just compelled to share with you guys because maybe this could help heal you if you're having any money issues or, any nervous system response to when you have to deal with money and the language of finance. Perhaps we can just rewire and re-alchemize, Scorpio, the way we are handling our own current, which is our energy, which is money. And so we're replacing the word income with energy coming towards me. So let's just sit with that. So, because again, some of these money words are very triggering. So, income, what's your income to debt ratio, right? All that shit. I just kind of go blank, right? Because sometimes numbers can numb you out, right? It's just begin watching the spell casting. So instead of income, it gave a different reflection. Well, how about just energy coming towards me? So maybe from now on, instead of thinking of income, I'm just thinking of incoming energy, right? Energy coming towards me. Expenses is energy I choose to circulate. So see, even just that difference, that harmonic, it's more empowering, it's more sovereign to say, because sometimes expenses can be overwhelming, especially when they say, is your income to debt ratio, or are you bringing in what you're putting out? Right? So it's the energy coming towards me is the incoming energy. My expenses are the energy I choose to circulate or recirculate to give back into the field. My budget is my energy map, which I can relate to because that's very astrology, right? I think of it like an astrological map, right? Think of like a soul chart or a soul map. So a budget is just an energy map. It's just where the energy of the current goes to. I thought, okay, I can handle that. My savings is going to be safety space I create for myself, right? So I think if I always create sacred containers was what I call them. So my savings account is just going to be a sacred container for my current. So that's an upgrade. That feels good in my nervous system, right? And the word debt. So replacing the word debt with past energy still moving through me, and it's not a punishment. So having debt is not a punishment. It's not a negative thing. It's just past energy still moving through my circulatory system that needs to be expressed, or it's going to keep circulating until it's done its course, right? And again, just keeping it very neutral. Investing, I can now use the terminology planting seeds for my future support. And that feels good, right? When you're investing, you're literally planting a seed that will grow later. And sometimes you may not get to see the full tree grow, right? So you're planting the seeds for your future, I'd say progeny or children or who you want to leave your legacy for, right? Your net worth is now the ecosystem that you've built for yourself, right? So your net worth is your ecosystem that you've built, right? Again, keeping it very neutral. So it's taking away, it's helping to neutralize fear, pressure, and scarcity thinking and money mindset because of the language. And instead, it's giving you movement, choice, and relationship with your own current, which is your money, right? If you're choosing to use the language in a new way. So I love that it says make it even simpler, child mind activated. If we're explaining money to a 6-year-old, because I always talk to chat and say, talk to me like I'm in the second grade, right? Like I'm just learning these things. 'Cause in a lot of way I am. In a lot of ways, it's a maturation process that's just being ignited now that my nervous system can handle it and reframe the language that's very loaded, especially when it comes to matters of money and finance, right? So the mantra it gave me is said, money is just energy that comes to you and you decide where it goes so it can help take care of you. And that's it. Not spreadsheets, not overwhelm, not complicated jargon, just comes in, it moves, and it supports life. Now, I love how it says too, now let's regulate the nervous system piece, because the language shift works best when your body feels safe. So next time you sit down and look at money, try this. Put one hand on your body, your heart, or your stomach, and say out loud if you can, I am safe learning this now. This is a new moment. And then look at your finances just for 5 to 10 minutes max. Don't overwhelm yourself. Don't, stare at your bank account and just wish you had more money in it and just create this story, because that's where it goes, at least for me anyway. And it says, we are not forcing long lessons. We are building trust with your system. And now here it talks about the astrology, which I think is really fun. And it talks about this being my superpower. I love the affirmation language it uses. It's such a good coach, if you will. So it says you've already found your bridge. Taurus equals money equals nourishment and stability. Gemini equals money that's learning and language. And Aries equals money. It's the courage to start fresh. So instead of I need to fix my finances, which has been a big one for me, it becomes I'm learning a new language of resource flow in this phase of my life. And that's a completely different frequency. And it is. And I'm going to say that 2 more times because that feels relevant. I'm learning a new language of resource flow in this phase of my life. I am learning a new language of resource flow in this phase of my life. And that's very much Venus and Gemini conjunct Uranus and Gemini. And Sedna is also there, which we talked about Sedna before in the last transmission, that goes deep into the metamorphosis of how we're literally regridding, repatterning our relationship with money by reframing the language, by respellcasting and using a more neutral language in relation to money and finance. So it says, gives me a reframe. It says, let me reflect something back to you in your voice. You're not bad with money, quote unquote, which I've been told many times and heard all throughout the years, right? The unconscious programming between the age of 0 and 7, and how I heard my parents talk about money and their own relationship to money that I took on as my own. But it says here, I'm not bad with money. You were initiated through financial pressure early, and now you're reclaiming the language on your own terms. That's not weakness, that's mastery and progress. So I really love that empowering language that I'm learning the money and the financial system and the financial language on my terms, in terms that my child like mine can understand, that doesn't feel so triggering and that my nervous system can handle, okay? And then it says, if we build this forward, we can see you literally can create your own personal astrology money language system. That's kind of interesting. It gives you ideas on how to recirculate it and use the language, use my own particular niche, which is astrology. Content for your audience. This would resonate hard with people. Simple frameworks you can teach and monetize. So it's also showing me how to reclaim my own monetary system by speaking on this, which is, again, is a very triggering, can be very triggering for a lot of people to talk about finance and their own currency, right? But it's time. This is what we're doing. We're upgrading. We're relearning the language. We're learning to speak on it in a new way, in a more empowering way. And we're doing it through alchemy. So, our ancestors always recommended to do some sort of ritual or initiation or activation during portal period times, during a full moon and a new moon, right? So full moon is coming to completion. It's illuminating that which needs to be alchemized and seen, because it is in Scorpio, opposite the sun. So we're really being asked to evaluate our values at this time. And if you want to know your values, I always recommend, and because I've done this before too, I go and check out my bank account and I see where I've spent my money in the last 3 months. What does my money go to primarily? Because sometimes, we don't think about where we spend our current. We just kind of do. Is it autonomic? Do we have to just pay bills? Is it only going to bills? For me, I realized a lot of my extra expenses go towards health products. I've been really doing some castor oil packs and black seed oil, and just working on my physical health, because I know that that really impacts everything that I do. And the amount of current that I generate is basically it's based on my health. And so my health has been a priority. So I'm realizing, okay, that's where I'm spending my finances these days, is going towards health products, right? Well, now with this ingress of Gemini into Uranus, I want to travel more. I want to see things. This is transiting my seventh house. And if you guys want to see where this change or transformation is happening, I would invite you to get a birth chart and look to see where Uranus is in Gemini. So again, for me, my own birth chart is happening in the seventh house of relationships. It's opposite Sagittarius, my rising. So if you're deep diving into astrology more and you want some support or some reflections on how to navigate your own birth chart, please reach out. I'd love to be able to support you, because this is my passion. I love talking astrology. Again, it's a very neutral language. It's an empowering language. It helps me to relate to my nervous system in a more harmonious way. It helps me face these dark shadow aspects of my unconscious that want to be seen and loved on and acknowledged, right? So I was really feeling this last night as I was starting to explore my finances. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, why am I so tired? Why is this, what's going on here? And so I've been working on my own practice, Virgo, right? South Node. The practice is what I call the stop, drop, and roll. I stop what I'm thinking or doing. I drop into my heart and I roll into the next breath, and I just allow myself to feel it. Okay, where am I feeling this in my nervous system? Why am I tired all of a sudden when I had these thoughts, right? Because the focus too with Uranus and Gemini is going to be mental health, and how we can learn to neutrally observe our thoughts and keep the ones that empower us, and learn to alchemize and transmute the ones that bring us harm and fear. And sometimes that's unconscious. Sometimes these thoughts are held literally in your nervous system based on past experiences, past trauma. So if you've ever had any kind of money issues, if you ever went through bankruptcy, foreclosure, and you had creditors banging down your door, that can be really traumatizing for the body, and we don't realize it. We just because we were in survival mode, is like, deal with it, keep going, deal with it, keep going. And then we didn't know how to deal with it, so then we became addicted to things, right? We started taking substances and doing avoidance behaviors because we didn't know how to deal with the trauma of not knowing how to feel safe and handle our own currency, our own monetary systems, because we've been through such terrific changes in our money, banking, monetary systems, and we felt unsafe a lot of the times. So now is the time for us to really come into coherence, to acknowledge that we all have money wounds somewhere, that we inherited money wounds from mom and dad, and maybe grandma and grandpa and great grandma and grandpa, right? Survival tendencies. We may have had on this planet, we're starting to realize, a tremendous cataclysm that created this sort of scar tissue within our consciousness about survival and about having enough, right? So this is part of the alchemy that we're having to face. And where do we store that in our body? Where is it stored in our unconscious? Where do we store it in a cellular memory, right? Do we inherit it from mom's womb? Because now we're understanding the importance of water and how water really is the source, right? We talk about source energy. Well, water is the primary source, the prima materia, which is the sacred waters within us. It's the mother's womb. This is very much Jupiter in Cancer. So we're starting to learn these things and remember that we do have the technology within us, but we have to regrid the language on how we speak about these things and to speak about it. Because if I'm going through this, that means somebody here, because we're all connected, is going through it. And so if one of us makes it, all of us make it, right? And so we're really here to be a collaborative, connective community, that we are all repairing from these old systems, and we're all regridding and repatterning our thoughts and our emotions based on how we speak about it, right? It's time to speak about it. Again, Venus and Gemini. So we got to talk about these things, even if they're uncomfortable. With Scorpio, sometimes these things are taboo. It rules 8th house matters: sex, death, taxes, intimate relationships, power dynamics within relationships. Who's got the money? Who's the sole provider? Are you both contributing to the bank account? Or are you looking to just one of you to contribute to the bank account? And what kind of power imbalance? Is it equitable, right? If somebody's the primary breadwinner, right, does that create an imbalance in the other partner who relies on that partner to give them money, right? I think of like almost like an allowance, right? So how do we navigate interpersonal relationships and our own money, our own currency? And how do we regulate that? How do we still be sovereign, but still be in connection with the other, right? Through intimate financial, I'd say covenants, right? Agreements. Because when you get married with somebody, it's a financial agreement to help basically support one another, right? This is what the law has set up. So the law is definitely influencing your marriage. If you're still getting married by the law, by the courthouse, then they have a direct connection to your finance, because that's what you're doing. You're signing a contract with another, and you're basically saying how you're going to exchange your energy. And if the contract or the covenant ever ends, then who gets what in the energy field, right? Who's entitled to what? And so this can be uncomfortable. And I know for families, a lot of people don't like to talk about inheritances. I know a lot of people actually get triggered when somebody transitions and there's an inheritance left. There's a lot of times when people squabble or argue about money and the resources and who gets what and who's entitled to what, right? So again, this is the language. And a lot of it is just safety concerns. It's about survival. It's about who's going to get to survive more comfortably. And right now with Pluto and Aquarius, it's like, look, none of us really have that lifeline anymore. Our lifeline is one another. It's how you treat your community, is how you treat your neighbors. It's how you caretake one another, because that's your sense of security and support. It's not so much the money game anymore. Money is just a reflection. It's a tool that represents your current. But the true wealth is how you circulate your energy first of inside of you. And that's health-wise, right? So how healthy are you? Because how healthy you are is going to dictate how wealthy you are. That's the new wealth system. It's directly tied to health. So who's been controlling the health system, right? Again, we go into deep dives with this because Pluto rules Aquarius, and it's also again squaring this energy. So we're being forced to see, wait a minute, who's been running our healthcare system? If our true wealth is our health, then who is primarily in charge of the healthcare, and what's the agenda? And is it really truly our health? If we've been in this slavery system, again, this is just a story, I'm a storyteller, but if we've been in this slavery system, then who really benefits by us not being healthy, but maybe just healthy enough just to be alive, but not healthy enough to really have a sense of what's really going on, right? Being in sort of this fog days. Because I don't know if you guys can relate, but if you don't feel good, it's hard to do anything. You can't really be revolutionary and create change and alchemize and do all the energy things you need to do if you don't feel well, right? So again, this is just really getting deep, because Scorpio is about alchemy, and it's about being able to generate and to regenerate and to self-heal. Again, it's just a story. Go back into the last transmission. We talked about Asclepius, which is right here in Leo right now, which is squaring both the sun and the moon. And Asclepius is our energy, our ability to regenerate, right? Because the story goes, Asclepius killed a snake, and then he observed another snake come up right behind after he killed the one snake and heal the snake, brought the snake back to life that he just killed with herbs, right? So he was observing, like, wait a minute, this snake, which is nature, divine intelligence, that's how I see it, our Kundalini life force energy, which runs along our spine, which is like our electrical current, that it has an ascending and descending current, right? And so if one is out of balance, so it was showing the two snakes, you need the two snakes. You need the two electrical currents, the ascending and the descending. Think of like a battery. We need those both in harmony in operation, right? Just like this toroidal field behind me. This is how our energy currents running constantly. But if we're out of balance, if our nervous system, if we've got a kink in one of these energy centers, then think of like a hose, right? You can't use the hose, a water hose, if it gets a kink in it, nothing comes out of it. And that's your current. So a lot of us have been kinked up based on our nervous system, these words, these trauma responses based on old monetary situations that we all had to go through. You know, job loss, divorce, sickness, our sense of safety and security there's always, all of us have gone through this initiation of where we felt unsafe. We felt insecure based on our money. So that's just part of the human design. I think that's part of also too maturation. But we just need each other to maybe tell a new story. And as we have these revelations, as we have these downloads, to share them, right? Gemini, it's about sharing information, and it's sort of disagreeable. In its disagreeable aspect, Gemini can be gossiping, right? The gossip energy, and did you hear that Martha went to, because it rules also third house matters, neighbors, everyday travel. These are some of the things that represent Gemini. And again, so why not gossip in a good way? Hey, what did it work for you? How did you overcome your money traumas? How did you regulate your nervous system when you were traumatized through old money situations? How did that work? Let's start gossiping about things that actually benefit humanity rather than just keeping us in this perpetual cycle of gloom and doom. And did you hear what Trump said? And did you hear that with the shooting? And, it's just like, is that serving you? Is it serving me? Is it serving your nervous system to continue these perpetuating fear-based thoughts that just keep you in this locked fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? And then it keeps your circulation, your energy, your money in this loop, this pattern that does not serve you. It actually keeps you from experiencing your full power, right? Because it's just power. And it's our relationship to power. This is also very Plutonian. So anyway, this is just the transmission that wanted to come through today. I wanted to just thank you so much for taking your time and your energy. And again, if you want to explore astrology, the very neutral language of how to talk on these energies, as we are starting to explore consciousness in a new way, Gemini is coming in and repatterning, giving us new opportunities to see reality and experience reality in a new way. But we have to really understand the power of language and spelling and spell casting. And if you do have trigger words with money or finance, your own abundance, you can upgrade it. You can use a language that's more neutral, that's more empowering, that puts you more in the driver's seat, right? It gives you more sovereignty even when you speak about these things in a new way. And so this is just the invitation to learn to really, to get into these states, sit with your shadow. I call it the golden shadow. Sit with these disincarnated parts of yourself that got fractaled out whenever your nervous system didn't feel safe, right? To sit with it, to hold your inner child, to say, I've got you, it's okay. You can reclaim your current. You can learn how to speak about money in a new way. And you can learn to play with it. Maybe start engaging with your own currency system. Be more playful. I think that's why we created these board games, right? Monopoly and Parcheesi and Yahtzee and some of the games I'm thinking of. But anyway, just have more fun with your own current. And that's what I intend to do, because that's what my nervous system is calling for. It doesn't want to be so heavy. It doesn't want to be so bogged down anymore with these heavier frequencies. I'm really, and I know all of us are, especially Uranus and Gemini, we're ready to lighten the load. Taurus can be very heavy, very fixed, very stagnant, but it was very grounding. We needed that time and space. And now it's moving into more air so we can have more dominion in the airspace, learn to travel with our thoughts, not get bogged down by our thoughts, and don't hold too much merit, because thoughts are just thoughts. They're just like a radio station. Sometimes you're just picking up on frequencies and other people's ideas. So really, it's time to know thyself, know what are your ideas, what do you get inspired by, what are your desires, and let's upgrade the language. Let's alchemize. Scorpio season. Alchemize how we speak about ourselves, how we talk to ourselves, how we talk to our partner. Let's recreate some different power dynamics within relationships, get more cohesive, more equitable, more clear, and setting some boundaries. If you felt out of balance in your relationships and your values and how you spend your money, especially in partnership, this is the time to really look at that, to get on board with each other, to hear the other partner's values, and to get into this, I'd say, third perspective, right? You have your perspective, then you have your partner's perspective, which is the other, Scorpio. And can you come up with a more coherent perspective that both of you share, that empowers both of you, and that you can relate to, that's again, shared values, because that's what this focus is about. And then learning a new language to speak on it. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for tuning into this transmission. And again, like, subscribe, tune into the channel, Livzenastrology. We do more of these metaphysical musings, conversations about the energy through an astrological perspective, an astrological lens. And if you want to learn to speak astrology more, I also have an app called Astrolingo app. It's very affordable. It's in beta testing, but it's a really great tool to learn the symbols, the language, the archetypes. And so you can start exploring astrology in your own way and getting into your own field and having a more sense of self-awareness through using this very neutral and I say powerful language. So thank you for speaking the language with me. Thank you for sharing your time and space, and I'll see you on the next transmission.